morning, everybody. This is Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. So today we're going to continue and hopefully complete our discussion on neurotransmitters. We've been chatting a bit in recent calls about moving our discussion onto hormones, so that rather than talking about how certain neurochemicals can be employed or serve the role as a change grid maneuver, instead, maybe the hormones can help us have a better understanding about how different regions of the change grid affect people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And then we can talk about what leads to what. Do I move there and suddenly have the hormones, or do I have the hormones and they move us there? So I think that'll be the next little section that we want to do a bit of a deeper dive into. In preparation for that, I will tell you that as challenging as I found it to find a simple chart of basic neurotransmitters for the non-medical professional, I am finding the quest for a similar chart for hormones to be even more difficult. So I will defer to Brian to tell me if he even knows if such a thing even exists. But isn't there like a list of hormones somewhere that like Boy Scouts go to when they're trying to get their merit badge? I mean, we just need a simple, basic listing of hormones and their impact on behavior. So
I'm sure something like that probably exists. I don't know where you will find it exactly,
well,
but when we talk about, like, that's why I appreciate Jane's terminology that we can use neuroactive. So the term neuroendocrine just simply means how the neurons are being active, or how the endocrine system is impacted by the neurons. So when you think about hormones, there essentially are three classes, if you will.
mhm.
So there are the amines, so things like norepinephrine, dopamine, epinephrine,
Yeah.
those are called catecholamines, right? So that's why they typically, not only the receptors they bind to, but the hormones they bind to. And then you have the peptides of protein. And so there you have those amino acids. And then you have steroids, which is what a cortisol is. So again, these are things, when you talk about the hormones, which is why they're long lasting as opposed to neurotransmitter activity or functionality. These are things that we can measure through people's blood. So, I mean, you actually can monitor these and see and understand at a high level the impact that it's having.
And so do you think it would be valuable to first look and see how the amines might affect placement on the change grid versus the steroids versus the, I mean, is it good to look at the general categories, or are those simply too general to give us any indications of where they might be found or prevalent on the change grid?
Probably be too general, because some of these, again, we've been using the terminology like they're excitatory, the neurotransmitters, or the inhibitory. But when they start connecting with the hormones and receptors, and remember, they're doing this all at once, and it could be impact. That's the whole point of a hormone. It's secreted in one area, but it can impact the functionality of other areas. And so this is why, again, like I call them the real neuroscientists. They, like, in the laboratories, they like to connect up the brain so they can see what regions are being activated at one time. Because that's where we will fall short in our conversation. But again, we can make some general assumptions, just based on what we understand about the neurotransmitters. And it wouldn't be wrong. It's just not the full, complete picture without understanding exactly the whole thing.
Yes, that said, certainly someone in the field of neuroscience should probably learn the change grid sufficiently well enough to create an actual legitimate map. So
absolutely,
there
and
you
that's
go.
what I said from my perspective. What I'm hoping, as I become licensed in the United States, is that physicians will understand this.
Sure.
Because think about it, you're trying to impact someone's health, but you don't understand what's going on underneath them. And so you only have one side of the picture. So there's no holistic approach to really help someone take control over their own health when they're outside the office. So you get 12 minutes with them in the office. I call this care drive-by care, right? So you get 12
Right.
minutes,
Right.
and that's not enough in
No.
terms of continuity of care and all these medical terminologies we talk about. So I think physicians should know this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, maybe we can't talk about all of the different impacts that a given neurotransmitter or a hormone might have on behavior, but certainly we can talk about some sort of hallmark patterns that one would associate with a particular hormone. So, for example, if we want to talk about testosterone, if I said to you guys, I don't think that we're going to find a whole lot of testosterone in a very in-grid plotting sort of a person. But does that feel right to you, or is it possible to have high levels of testosterone and be the absolute opposite of aggressive and all the other sorts of behaviors we associate with testosterone?
Absolutely, absolutely. And see, testosterone and dopamine have a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
Dopamine and estrogen have a symbiotic relationship, just like where serotonin, its first cousin, if you will, is oxytocin. So, and when I
Mhm.
say that, the symbiotic relationship, that means when testosterone is high, it's going to impact dopamine. Same thing when oxytocin is high, it's going to impact serotonin. So they impact one another.
And
That's the kind of
so,
symbiotic relationship they have when we're talking about the bondings of the hormones to these neurotransmitters.
and so it'll be interesting then to also explore the neurotransmitters' performance as a change grid maneuver. It kind of created the movement as you've characterized it in the past, but it's
Right,
moving you into a particular area where the hormones tend to be more pronounced, more prevalent, more resident.
right, right.
Yeah,
You
and
get a
so
residual effect when the hormones are active. So in other words, the neurotransmitters just sends the signal,
mhm,
and then the receptors of the postsynaptic and the hormones that is binding to, now you're going to get a lingering effect. So that's why
yes.
one is more long lasting than the other.
Yes, yes. Well, and again, if we looked at the outgrid danger zone here where I'm squiggling around, we would find very high levels of dopamine. We would find high levels of adrenaline. And if we also say, at least in a male, that's high levels of testosterone all happening at once, would it be
Yes,
any surprise to find that that's very aggressive, um, perhaps threatening, behaviorally threatening sort of a state to find oneself in?
exactly. Because
You,
remember, dopamine just wants more dopamine. So if you're on
that's
this
right.
adrenaline rush and high and you're feeling good about it,
Yeah,
forget
throw the
it. I
endorphins
mean,
in right there. Yep. Same
exactly,
thing. Same thing.
exactly.
So again, we talk about having this bowl of neurochemical sort of soup. That particular serving of soup is something that we can kind of say, I'm not going to find that set of behaviors very far in grid. I'm not going to find that set of behaviors very far down grid. I'm not going to find them up grid either, but up grid could be as dramatic as the outgrid behavior set is, but that whole feeling of readiness to handle whatever the challenge is so different that I don't think, well, upgrade, I don't think I'm not getting the endorphins. I have the dopamine for sure. I have the adrenaline for sure. But do I have testosterone? Is that testosterone, which to me, testosterone is about preparing me for the fight half of fight and flight.
It
I'm
can,
also
but
a
it can also
particularly
be
good
a,
runner. So,
yeah, but it can see, remember when it comes to dopamine, there's something called the dopamine prediction reward era. And
mm,
what that is saying is, remember we talked about the motivation of something or the anticipation of something creates the same effect as if you actually received the reward.
mhm, mhm.
And so that happens when dopamine is really, really high. So even the anticipation of something will give you that same effect that might bind with that testosterone. So in other words, it'll give you that feeling as if you actually can accomplish it, although you can't. So think
Right.
about people who buy into certain brands like the Nike brand, the Warrior brand.
Yeah.
and they never ran a race before, but you buy a $200 pair of shoes and all of a sudden you think you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example. That's great. That's great. Well, again, we'll do our deeper dive into hormones as our next topic arises. But I just think that it's kind of interesting to always get back to, can we find a way to better understand how the change grid connects? Because again, the change grid is just a diagram that helps us to understand what is likely to be happening under a given set of perceptions that someone has about whatever the specific activity happens to be. And because we know that, well, perceptions are thoughts, and thoughts, as far as the brain is concerned, could be so close to reality that the brain is going to respond identically regardless of whether it really is happening or not. We can kind of go, that moves us on the change grid. And our thoughts might move us, but did our thoughts move us by triggering the neurotransmitters who actually moved us? And how did it decide where to move us to? It has to move us to some place that the brain already understands will be most useful to us. Again, real or imagined, but most useful to us based on whatever those perceptions happen to be.
Yeah, I
So if,
remember my professor used to say this, and I thought it was very interesting comment, and I keep that in mind. He says the way that what you just described in terms of our perception and how interoception, these internal states that the neurons are communicating, and they're looking to monitor this. He said the brain functions like a projector. And so whatever is on that projection, that projector, that's what the nervous system is picking up on. And so it's
mm,
monitoring the external, but it's playing, it's the movie is based on what's going on internally. And
right,
so it's
because
looking for that match.
the neurotransmitters can't see anything. So
Exactly,
they're
exactly.
counting on the reliability of the information that's being sent their way, or being
Right.
very interesting. All right, well, okay, good. So listen, we had one last neurotransmitter to look at, and Brian, this is one that you suggested because you felt 8 wasn't enough. So histamine was added to the pile. Now, I think all of us know of histamine, but we only know it because we have allergic reactions, or we have the sniffles, or whatever. So what is it that, so histamine seems to serve um, as more than one role. So in its role as a
Yeah.
neurotransmitter, what is it doing versus its role as a substance that's in our bloodstream that's affecting whatever is going on symptomatically, or, uh, as far as a reaction to um, an allergen or something like that. So when you're thinking about it being a neurotransmitter, tell us more about that part.
Well, see, this is why I said that it's good to know like these receptors that are connected, because this is one of the main neurotransmitters that impacts the neuroendocrine. So it's primarily responsible for neuroendocrine control, and is secreted in the hypothalamus, which is where homeostasis resides. So it's about the balancing. So it's going to balance your behavioral states, biological rhythms, energy metabolism, fluid balance. It decreases GABA, increases the epinephrine and norepinephrine levels. So when you think about histamine, and that's why I said it's important to understand it, think about all your, what we call ultradian rhythms. Circadian rhythms deal with your sleep cycles. Ultradian rhythms deal with rhythms that are when you're awake. And these are things that are measurable, they're quantifiable, they're observable. So when you talk about, again, the endocrine system and the hormones, these are things that we can measure through the blood. So breathing, your heart rate, these are things that are controlled, that are impacted by histamine, right? So it's a major part of the neuroendocrine control. They're connected to these H1 receptors, and there are 7 types of H1 receptors, and those move pretty fast. Because think about it, if these are things that impact the homeostasis, you don't need, the body doesn't need to figure out how to breathe. You'll be in trouble, right? It doesn't need to figure out how to pump blood. It doesn't need to figure out how to metabolize food. You'll be in trouble. So these things operate really, really fast. And then they have that hormonal effect that lasts even longer to make sure that the functionality lasts more than once.
And so when, let's first talk about an allergic reaction and see if you can help us understand what's going on as far as the neurotransmitters go on. So we've been exposed to some sort of an allergen. We'll leave it as a mild one right now rather than go into anaphylactic shock or anything, but it's just a regular old allergen we encounter, seasonal allergies, whatever. Somehow or another, our body detects that this invader is present and it wants to defend itself against that invader. Is that what's triggering it? Is that the...
Yes.
All right.
And that happens automatically. See, then we're talking about things that are connected to your peripheral nervous system, which is part of the ANS, or autonomous nervous system, key word being in there, auto. Yes. So these are the things that happen automatically. We don't have to ask for it to happen. These are just defenses. Because like when we talk about 90% of serotonin is in the gastrointestinal tract. So, and I said there's 30 alone in the gut, and how your microbiome communicates with the brain. You have this small little, I guess you can call it a sheath. It's called the endothelial sheath.
Yes. And
that crosses the blood-brain barrier. So blood-brain barrier keeps out infections in your brain. The gut can speak directly. It's almost like having a superhighway directly to speak to the brain. So imagine that some of these hormones and some of these neurotransmitters have that kind of impact. So we get all, that's why it's important that we, we have all these, that's why I said in terms of interoception, sensations are non-negotiable. So these receptors are always picking up something externally that internally we're mentally, emotionally, physically digesting in terms of its understanding how the two are connecting together. Yes. So the sensations are always picking up on it, even, sometimes when we're not aware of it. It's always recording.
And so, going back to the actual allergic reaction sort of a thing, it seems to me that what histamine is doing, or a side effect of what histamine is trying to do, is that it's moving us on the change grid.
And yeah, it's going to try to regulate.
Right. And so it feels like it's going to be more of an upgrid maneuver. It's getting our attention about something, or maybe even a bit of an outgrid maneuver where it's trying to tackle something.
Right.
It does not feel...
It decreases GABA. So the GABA, is to relax. So it decreases GABA. So it's to awaken something to bring it back to balance again.
All right, and so we could certainly say that histamine as a neurotransmitter is going to be moving us more up-grid or out-grid.
Right.
It is not going to move us in-grid or down-grid.
No.
That's why we take
it decreases GABA and it increases norepinephrine and epinephrine.
All right, and so it's so for those of you who aren't looking at a screen, what I'm doing right now is drawing where histamine as a neurotransmitter would move us on the change grid. Now, one thing to kind of just bring this to everyone else's attention, when I take an antihistamine, it is doing obviously the opposite. It's moving me physically, emotionally, sniffily, down-grid or in-grid, as the case may be. So I kind of get that, but doesn't the body have its own antihistamine, or does it just stop secreting so much histamine? So how does it do? Because I always feel like when I have an allergic reaction to something and I take a pill, I think I'm actually doing something that's interfering with my body doing what my body wants to do.
Right. It produces inside the body. So indeed it has its own. And it's the same thing when it comes to a lot of these neurotransmitters like the GABA and glutamate. These are things that are produced in the body. Right. It's when we ingest these extra things, what tends to happen is it mimics it, but it's elevating it at the same time. And it has a different effect for everyone because there certainly are reasons why people may need to supplement.
Well, I'm
So
glad that you said that because, going back to this allergic reaction sort of a thing, and I'm talking about mild seasonal allergic reactions, I've always thought that my body has encountered an invader. And so it
hmm
is producing these histamines in order to do whatever it can do to get that invader under control. But I'm irritated by the sniffles, and I am subjected to advertising on TV about every anti-sniffle medication that's out there. So I decide to take an antihistamine. That antihistamine superficially makes me feel better, but doesn't that then say, hey, body, now you've got to produce even more histamine in
exactly,
order to
that's
get
what
back
happens.
to a therapeutic level?
Yeah, yeah.
So I've always my philosophy always been endure it, just deal with it. Being uncomfortable is not the same thing as being threatened. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. So now, um, does that become problematic then when at a certain point does histamine become in and of itself toxic to the body?
It can, just like serotonin. There's something called serotonin syndrome. So when people take like the SSRIs or the
Yes.
SNRIs,
Mhm.
different classes of those can create serotonin syndrome where too much serotonin is being produced in the body. So again, that mimicking of it, it produces too much. And so serotonin, acetylcholine, these are things that happen in the nerve endings. So it doesn't
Mhm.
take, much to throw things way out of whack and create some serious like seizures and all different kinds of things. It's just not good. So again, there are reasons why supplementation may be necessary, but those are things that need to be monitored because these things like endorphins, those are they call it nature's painkillers, right? So when we're taking
Mhm.
things to uptake it, you have to just be careful with it because that mimicking, you don't know how it's going to impact you specifically. That's
Mhm.
what makes the
Mhm.
brain so unique is how we each individually use it.
And so, am I also right then that the histamine moves me into this more, well, it's almost into a bit of a fight or flight response kind of thing.
Right.
It is a bit of a survival kind of a response. But that once I get there, again, neurotransmitters, as described, are very short lived.
hmm
But the allergic reaction is sustained, and dealing with that invader takes time. And so
hmm
does that then mean that there ends up being an ongoing level of histamine that will continue the work after the neurotransmitter gets things started?
Yeah, it could because you gotta remember these cells, your cells die off and regenerate themselves.
Yes.
And it's a natural process, right? But when we introduce things that mimic that process happening, then cells have to figure themselves out. Just like we said for glutamate, when too much is produced, it creates this cellular suicide, if you will, to just protect itself, to
Mhm,
protect the others from being impacted by that. So it can
mhm,
tell that. That's how smart design these systems and processes are. But
mhm,
when we
mhm.
start messing with, our natural capacities, then we just have to be willing to take the consequences if it doesn't work
Right,
our way.
right. Okay, now and again, we got a lot of people on the call. You're all welcome to unmute and share whatever you'd like to share, ask whatever you'd like to ask. So this doesn't need to be the T and Brian show. So feel free to chime in. I personally am fascinated by histamines and antihistamines because I've always dealt with low-level seasonal allergies, and I've never known whether to just deal with it or take a pill or whatever the case may be. So that's why I'm finding this really interesting to see where it maps because I do know this about allergies. And again, allergies are a small little aspect of the world of histamines, but nevertheless, it's probably the one we've all experienced most most uniformly or most we've all done it, we've all been there. Um, and so I know that we can take an antihistamine. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but in the early days of the marketing of antihistamines were marketed very powerfully as a weight reduction technique. So
Hmm.
people would take these antihistamines because they would have some sort of an impact on the person's physiology, behavior, etc. And so at a certain dosage level, it became very excitatory. But when the level got too high, we all know what we feel like after taking a dose of NyQuil. The antihistamine is going to knock us out. And so we're going to end up having this opposite, very far downgrade response to the antihistamine or the, yeah, I'll just leave it there. So Brian or anyone, can you kind of talk a little bit about antihistamines as diet pills versus antihistamines as sleep agents? Oh, because by the way, how many of you have ever taken a Tylenol PM? A Tylenol PM has an antihistamine in it. So that's what's helping you fall asleep, and certainly not the Tylenol.
Yeah, yeah. So remember I said no, the histamine is a major neuroendocrine control mechanism. So it impacts that energy metabolism. So when you're taking the antihistamine, you know, again, we're a supplement for something that we can naturally do. Because like I've had allergies, I had a lot of gut issues because of preemie baby, so I couldn't digest a lot of things. But the way that I do things, instead of taking the supplements, I would take the supplement, but I literally would train my body to do things naturally. And that tends to help me, so that I'm not taken away from the natural capacities.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now I'm using thermogenesis and different things like that to help with this gut issue that I've been having with autoimmune, so that I can not have to resort to taking methotrexate, which is a chemo drug.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that is doing, or at least that's what that drug class does, is it's trying to kill off these bad cells, which it does. The challenge becomes it also kills off the good cells with the hope that, again, it'll go through that natural process of regenerating the
Mm-hmm.
cells. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're already weak and have a weak system, the process to do that may take longer than you anticipate, which means you're not getting better faster, you're getting weaker. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to put myself up for that. So when you look at like, and T, I know you see an osteopathic physician,
Yes.
they are all trained in osteopathic medicine. It's ingrained in them this idea of structure, function, integration, or interrelation. And so this is why they do the hands-on manipulation, because they believe that if you can just position the body for healing,
Mm-hmm.
that it will heal itself without any medication, without any prodding, without any surgery. It may
Yes.
take time, but the natural way. And so I'm always looking for the natural way first, and then I might take a supplement. But then I'm supplementing the supplement with some kind of natural tendencies to get the body reordered. Because you got to remember, if we're taking a supplement, same thing with dopamine. We're training our system that this is required, this is necessary. You change the whole landscape of your ecosystem now.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes the dangerous part of it.
And so this idea about the body can regulate its own levels of histamine, is it using a different neurochemical to counteract the histamine, or is it just reducing the amount of histamine activity?
It's reducing the amount, because remember, there are seven, they're connected to what's called H1 receptors.
Mm-hmm.
And so these receptors and the hormones are very smart in their design and their functionality, but they're very precise.
Right.
And so when you're implementing supplements, now it has to figure out, because that's what these SSRIs and all these supplements are doing, is it's targeting the postsynaptic cells. So it's targeting them and it's trying to communicate with them like, hey, this is what I'm, I'm one of you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens the way it's supposed to. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it's shorter. It depends on the person and their ecosystem, how things are functioning. So that's why everyone has a different reaction to even taking a multivitamin.
Right. Right. Well, so now I'm kind of wondering if there are things that we could do to control our own histamine levels. Again, everyone who's on the call is somehow or another affiliated with the world of human development. Very few of us on the call are able to prescribe any sort of medication or perform any sort of medical intervention. What we do is we have conversations with people. We try to help them change their perceptions. So I get it in the case of the example of an allergy that I've just used. There is some sort of external invader that's trying to do what it wants to do. Um, so I'm curious about two things. Number one, in the case of an allergic reaction, are there some things that people can do more cognitively, more with working with their mind, that would improve the effectiveness of the histamine, or how about hold the negative side effects of the histamine release at bay? So is that possible? Um, and then I guess, is there also a set of circumstances where, forget allergies even exist, that people have high levels of histamine going on that really isn't serving them well? So there you go. That's a lot for you to think about and process and talk about.
And
I'm
So
sure there is, because you
this is
hear physicians tell people like that have allergies, like they always look at like their environment that they're in and those kinds of things. So I'm sure there's something that we can do. I'm not necessarily, that's not my specialty per se, but I am certified lifestyle medicine. So that's a question that I'll be asking people is like, tell me about your environment. Tell me about even your work. Because again, cortisol, stress in and of itself, is designed to get us to move, but there's something that triggers it. And so, you don't want to just always be triggering it. So a lot of times we trigger these kinds of things, and change environment, changing how we think about things. And I know some anesthesiologists are studying this in terms of pain medication or pain management, I should say. They're studying how the mind actually processes pain so that they don't have to give so much medications, particularly addictive medications. So we know it has an impact. I just don't know how to really convey it, because I haven't seen a lot of research on it.
Excuse me, I have a question about this. I have all kinds of allergies, and I don't take drugs for it, but I do get allergy shots, which is kind of a homeopathic approach, to injecting whatever it is and then having your body fight it off. What is your perspective? I mean, I've been doing that for a long time, and it does work.
Oh yeah.
But what is your, am I doing the same thing that you're saying that a supplement would do, which is training my body not to do its own thing, or
It's not so much that it's training the body not to do its own thing. And see, a shot will work a lot more effective than a supplement. But you're not taking it like every day or all the time. Same thing like when an athlete gets a steroid injection, right? It's improving a condition, but the sports physician will tell them, hey, you can only get but so many of these, per year or per cycle, or else it'll have the adverse effect. It will weaken the muscle. It will weaken the tendons. And so you'll have more injury. So again, these things help. We just don't want to rely on them as the source, like, they're, the answers in the pill kind of a thing, like they show on these advertisements sometimes.
well, I think too what Kathy's getting to, or for the homeopathic remedy, is the thought that, just like we might do cognitive behavioral therapy with a client in conversation and all that, the body has its own, I think, opportunity to do its own cognitive behavioral therapy. So the body encountered this allergen. The body understood it only the way the body understood it at that point in time, and viewed it as such a threat. It ended up having this big allergic reaction to that. I'll give you guys an example of it in our own lives. We have a grandnephew. His name's Justin. And Justin, like so many kids these days, is profoundly allergic to peanuts. tree nuts altogether for that matter, but peanuts is the big culprit. And his mom, we'll call her Rhonda because that's her name. Rhonda has done everything she can do to try to get this kid to have an environment that is free from peanuts, a future life that's free from peanuts or whatever. Well, she got him involved in a bit of a therapeutic study that had to do with exposing him to peanuts. And it's taken a long time. I don't think it's probably been the better part of a couple of years that he's been exposed to microscopic little doses of whatever the peanut issue really is, the peanut chemical really is, it's causing the reaction. And now he is up to the point where he can actually tolerate a peanut, a single peanut. In fact, I think he has to take one peanut every single day for whatever the time period in order to do that, because he's had to re-educate his body to understand that this peanut is not the threat that his body originally thought this peanut was. And so it's learned a new way. Like I said, cognitive behavioral. It better understands the peanut, so it's not behaving in the way that it did initially. So does that have any real medical basis, Brian, or did I just make something up?
No, you're absolutely right. Like I said, for me, as a preemie baby, there's many things that I could not digest, and a lot of dairy products in particular. So a lot of times when people are so-called lactose intolerant, it isn't that they're lactose intolerant. A person like myself actually lack the enzyme, the actual protein to digest it. Mm-hmm. So that means that I just have to stay away from it.
Right. Right.
Now, I use alternatives to it, and that's what these supplements are actually meant to do. They're meant to supplement. So in other words, they're meant to jumpstart something that already happens naturally. So, I take supplements to digest different things, and it's training the body. The same thing, I couldn't digest meat, so they thought, or it was said that I had diverticular disease, but kids don't get diverticulosis. So again, I lack some kind of enzymes to where I can't digest meat, or it doesn't digest well. Now I probably can now that I'm an adult, but I don't have a good history with it. So it doesn't make sense to introduce that to my system now, because the microbiome is just like your own ecosystem. So I'm concerned about what would I do? What would it do to me? Would it slow me down energetically, because it's digesting this new source of energy. So I just stay away from it.
Mm-hmm. And even what
so
you've
there's
just
all
described,
these things that we can do, the acupuncture, all these kinds of things that the medical establishment here will call alternative. These are great things to jumpstart your natural systems.
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to bring to everyone's attention is that Brian's story there just illustrated the nature of change. So this whole idea that we change in order to gain or maintain control. We're not resistant to change itself. We're resistant to losing control. So the only reason why we would make a change is because we believe that by making the change, we will end up some way or another better off, because no one is going to make a change that they believe is going to result in a loss of control. And so apply that to what he's just said about his relationship with meat. So he's really never had much of it. He's fine. He doesn't need more. So in what way would adding meat to his diet enhance his sense of control? In fact, there is a risk, because there's an unknown. He doesn't know how it would affect him if he did have some meat. And so this whole idea about being resistant to making a change, at the heart of that resistance is this one word, control. And so did I just describe what's going on for you, Brian?
Absolutely. Now, what it means is that, like I said, early in January, I ended up in a hospital, which is, shocking for my whole family, because I was always the athlete, the one in shape. And I'm 6'3" now, so I'm a big guy, 190. But I noticed my energy was low, and I walk everywhere. Like, I just prefer to walk. That's my daily thing. And I ended up in the hospital with pernicious anemia.
Oh.
So that means that my red blood cells were destroying themselves faster than they were being recreated. And my vitamin B12 was non-existent. So vegans and vegetarians, you can't get B12 from plants. It comes from meat.
Yeah.
So I know I have to supplement that. So I have to take B12 shots because I don't get enough of it.
Yeah. 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 But, and so under what circumstances would you actually eat meat? Well, you know, again, we're going back to this basics, the nature of change. We don't want to lose control. If he had no choice, if he was in a situation where it's either you're going to eat meat or you're not going to eat at all, okay, then it might be worth taking the risk. So change always involves an element of risk. So why make that change if you don't think that there's going to be a better chance of success than a chance of failure? So, all right, now, one thing I'd like to get back to about this histamine thing, because I'm finding this all very fascinating on the allergy sort of thing, is that how does it affect people's attitudes, beliefs, and behavior when they are having any kind of a histamine triggering life situation? Now, I bring this up because we're all doing consulting work and coaching work. We're talking to people all day long who may very well be in the midst of a mild or severe histamine event. And so does the histamine make them more XYZ? Does it make them less 1, 2, 3? What is it that it's doing, and how does that affect their ability to see the world as it is and to do whatever it is that we might be there to try to help them do?
That's interesting. It does impact behavior state, and it's known as a putative neurotransmitter, which means it's very localized. So it said it's connected to 7 different H1 receptors, and each one of those have different functionalities and capabilities. So I know it impacts their behavioral state, because when we talk about neuroendocrine control, we're talking about natural, like, biological rhythms. So a person that's naturally calm, like a person like myself, I don't, get too riled up about something, about much, I should say. But there are times, particularly now during the pandemic, where I just felt this overwhelming rush of frustration and disappointment because of all this extremism of behaviors that's going on. I'm like trying to process this and understand it. Like I said, when I got my voter registration mail sent from me in Florida up here to, me in the DC area, I got nervous. I'm not voting yet, but I felt that sense of anxiousness, if you will.
Right, anxiety, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it has these effect on us. It wasn't until I calmed myself down, like say Kathy taught me the breathing, and I calmed down a little bit. And see, we have these biological rhythms and things that we're used to. Because like when Kathy taught me the breathing resets your body. It do the same thing like if something happened to your mobile phone and you call your provider up, they say, okay, let's turn your phone off, wait 15 seconds, turn it on. That's called a soft reset. Breathing resets the balance of the body almost immediately. Like I'm used to the short breaths that you take when, learn to martial arts, when you're striking someone or you have to execute a strike. The breaths that Kathy taught me, I didn't tell her that, but I went to sleep after. Like it literally put me to sleep. I'm like, this would be a good time for a nap. We talked early in the afternoon. I didn't wake up till like 10:30 that evening. That was already time for me to go to bed. So that was a whole new breathing pattern that I learned, that the other physicians also who are on the front lines in emergency rooms, that they said, I just excuse myself when I have a moment and I go into the stairwell and I practice this breathing. They say they come back and they're really calm. So just these, when we talk about neuroendocrine system, things that impact our biological rhythms, we can do one that has a cascade effect on the other, and breathing is one of them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I go to my yoga, I do my meditation, so I understand the power of breath. And we've chatted about before that every emotion has a breathing pattern associated with it. And so if you can duplicate a particular breathing pattern, you can move yourself into that particular emotion. Or if you notice you're breathing in a particular pattern and feeling a way you don't want to feel, the moment you change whatever that breathing pattern is, you're going to move someplace else on the change grid. And so I love this idea that breathing all by itself can change your bowl of neurotransmitter soup or neurochemical soup.
Absolutely.
So now, yes.
Kathy, I wondered, Kathy once gave us the name of someone that she thought was potentially retired, but was an expert in breathing.
Yeah, Kathy, go ahead and unmute. I know you've got construction going on where you're at, but we'll deal with any background noise. So if you can unmute yourself, yeah.
Actually, I thought it was, the breathing techniques that I use come from my meditation group, a group called the Light Source Center.
Oh.
It was taught to me by a woman who's now passed away, but who was an incredible teacher, spiritual teacher. So what I do is based in that. And that's what I taught Brian. But I was asking if there were other, I'm trying to understand specific breathing patterns, you know, that he has talked about moving you around the change grid. And I think it was Edie who told me about, what is it, Morning? Yeah, Morning
Jim
Star.
Morningstar is the
Jim
person.
Morningstar, yep.
And
Yeah.
Jim Morningstar, probably in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's where I'm from. And
Yeah.
he's supposed to be the best in the country, but my friends who are really into all this thought he could be retired, but he would probably have the best suggestions of where to go.
Yeah,
And
I looked him up, and I'm not as, I mean, I need to really study him more, but I'm not as impressed with that. But I can't say that. I haven't studied him enough. I don't know. There's another group called the Alchemy of Breath, and I can't remember the guy's name, and it's an Italian name, who runs this program. But my only concern about it is that it's very what's the term? You know, he's got this whole pricing thing going on where it's very expensive to be part of it. You know, there's this whole marketing thing that's attached to it. So I'm kind of reticent about getting too deep with it. But I have been trying to explore. I mean, I use breathing for meditation, but have been also trying. Andrew Huberman, Brian, also taught some breathing on his podcasts or whatever, uses some breathing approaches as well, and I'm just trying to find that source that said that and maybe it doesn't exist in one place, that says how can we use different breaths, for example, to excite dopamine or to bring in the serotonin. You know, the meditation exercises that I use are much more serotonin based, I think. I mean, I think they're triggering serotonin. I mean, that's my guess. They're triggering serotonin, on what you're saying, because they can bring you into a deep meditative state. Now, from that breathing exercise, I don't just do that. I then go into a whole visualization approach with that. What that allows me to do is get into an altered state where I can connect and go into a visualization that's very, very different, you know, than what our regular world is, and get insight from that. But the breathing meditation in and of itself is just fantastic because, I mean, I use that with a lot of my clients just to get people to a point where they can reduce their anxiety. Okay,
Exactly.
I just slid something
cool.
onto the screen.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
But all I did was I just did a little Google breathing patterns, emotions. And what I thought was interesting and why I slid it in is that there's a lot of them. Some of them are very much based on psychology. You go a little bit deeper, it's based in yoga.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's something that's being explored from a lot of different angles. I love this one here, ResearchGate, respiratory feedback in the generation of emotion.
See, that's what Huberman studies, the neuroscience Andrew Huberman. There's a lot of study about meditation and breathing and how it, again, resets these biological rhythms. So it has a cascade effect. But like Kathy said, they teach this to professional athletes. So they're practicing the breathing when they're coming back from like a career ending injury, but then they go into the visualization, and then they might go do some kind of deliberate practice and functionality. See, that all connects well with neuroplasticity. So you're marking a neuron for change. And when that becomes a practice, now you're saying, oh, the neurons are picking up on this, that, okay, this is normal. This is the way to go. And so you can get back into it even if you go away from it for a while. They talked about this in Well Done, the book, WHALE, when people go down to Disney and they were asking, they were using the trainers to talk about how do you teach a 2-ton whale to do what we want it to do? Well, it starts off with positive reinforcement with some kind of reward, but sooner or later, they're doing that function or whatever it is they're designed to do or they're trained to do without even a reward there. So they automate the behavior. And that's exactly what happens when you're doing these breathing things. You're getting back to nature, so to speak, you're finding a way to automate that when you need it.
Right,
That's
because,
right.
and I think it's interesting to look at that is that about dopamine in the animal, that it knows it's going to feel some sense of reward, some sense of connection, some sense of, something. So, I mean, animals have their own neurotransmitter soup going on, so.
Absolutely.
I mean, what that breathing exercise does, to put it in change grid terms, is it brings you to your PowerPoint. It gives you choices, and it gives you choices. So, sometimes it can put you to sleep. I mean, my friends, we call it sleepitating, where
No, we talk about yogic sleep.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you're fully awake. On the other hand, your body is doing all kinds of.
So it's not true meditation, which to me is a much more active visualization experience. But you can go into active visualization from there, or you can go into the sleep piece. But for me, it's about whatever your body needs then.
Ellen, go ahead and share what you just typed over.
Well, as we have this discussion and you were saying, T, what could be the next pathway for us? I'm just wondering if we could begin to locate some of these resources around breathing that people find credible, and then actually study this just as we've been doing with the neurotransmitters. And the advantage of that would be that we can try out these patterns ourselves and see where it moves us.
I think that's a great idea.
I would love that.
You can breathe your way to change.
I would love that, because I believe we can do that, and we can teach people to do that.
Absolutely.
That's the next one. We'll do breathe your way to change.
Woohoo!
Yay. Now, because I think about that, just glancing at the change grid, forget doing any kind of deep dive discussion, we have to know that the breathing associated with being upgrid is very different than outgrid, very different than downgrid or ingrid. So if we know that in these large regions, it's going to be different, that means that every place in between is going to have its own little variations happening.
Absolutely.
So, well, now we only have 4 minutes left, and I do want to put this histamine question to rest so we can be finished with the neurotransmitters as of today's calls. But I wanted to say, it's wonderful to have discussions about neurotransmitters. We need to always take it back, to the change grid, because that's our foundation, but to the work that we're actually doing. And so one of the things that I've always felt is that there are certain places on the change grid where a person, a client, would be absolutely uncoachable. And there would be other places on the change grid where the person would not really need any coaching in that moment, not to suggest it isn't always beneficial. And then there are areas where it's particularly useful to people. So as I brought up that question about when someone is having a big histamine flood going on, I do believe it's very difficult for them to focus on anything other than whatever they're dealing with this histamine thing. So you guys know if you're having an allergic reaction to something, seasonal allergies, and you've got like that whole sinus headache going on, this is not the time to talk to you about how to better market your business. So, because your head's just not there, it's just not there. And so you may not be, I want to say, intellectually resistant to it. You just can't handle it at that point in time. Can you guys all relate to that? Or like when you've got a tummy ache, the whole world is wrong, there are these things that we have to kind of appreciate. And so if I just said as like a little final question to you guys, where on the change grid does someone become less coachable?
Once again, I think it's always in the danger zones.
The danger zones. And so how many of you ever dealt with a client who's in the outgrid danger zone? You think they're going to take your advice? You think they're going to re-examine?
I'm too busy for that.
Yep.
I got stuff to do, T. I can't,
Yeah, right, exactly. Hey, I'm got other priorities. I don't need.
Make an appointment.
Yeah, exactly, that I can cancel later. So,
Right.
the upgrade person doesn't want coaching. What does an upgrade person want? Upgrade danger zone. They don't want coaching.
They want you to fix it.
They want intervention. They want to be rescued. so that's it. The downgrade person isn't really ready for coaching or human development. Why?
They don't need it. They know everything that's worth knowing.
Right. They could be dead wrong, but they just don't think there's any reason to be having this discussion. And in-grid is always the most difficult to understand, but in-grid people, what do you think? Are they open to coaching?
If it isn't too taxing.
If it isn't too taxing, and also they come up with a deserving kind of thing. You might even hear them say, I think other people need it more than I do, or
I think it's the fatalism. I think there's a fatalism.
It won't change. It won't change.
Yeah.
All right. And if I said in the center of the change grid, I think that you might be open to coaching, but I think the center of the change grid, it's just because you're open, period. It's not so much that you've got some sort of issue or whatever that you want to deal with. That's not the center of the change grid. So the center of the change grid is a place of balance and harmony, of caring detachment. And so I think that you would love to talk to a coach or anybody, because that's what you do when you're in the middle of the change grid. But as far as purposeful, directed sort of human development work, it happens between that. So if you guys look at the screen for a second, it happens between that PowerPoint and going out to this red circle. So that's our world of development. That's the world where people are, I want to say, need to make a change or want to make a change, looking to change. They put a different frame around it, but still change exists between the center of the change grid and whatever that red circle is. Beyond that, I just think you encounter resistance in different forms. So I brought that up only to say that histamine can be one of the things that would be aggravating that situation. So if that histamine response is moving me too far out grid because I'm fed up with the allergies or whatever, that's going to impact my readiness to be to develop. And the upgrade one, by the way, this was another example. I talked about let's just talk about mild allergies. Linda is profoundly allergic to all analgesics and bee stings. I'm talking about rushing to the emergency room, pull out the EpiPen if she's in that situation. So if she's having that kind of a reaction, this is a true life or death situation. I promise you, she has no interest in talking about what you want to do for dinner. So it's just not going to happen. I was curious, and we're at the top of the hour right now, but Brian, maybe you can help me with this. So Linda is having this profound anaphylactic reaction to something. The EpiPen is obviously giving her epinephrine. So whatever's going on in her body is lowering all of her metabolic responses, right? She's not breathing right. Her heart rate's being affected, all that stuff that comes along with anaphylactic sort of shock because they're giving her an upper. So I was just kind of wondering what's happening with histamines when you're looking at an allergic reaction that is that severe. Is it histamine anymore, or is it something else going on? Oh, actually, Brian had to drop off the call, so we can't even answer that. So let's remember just to ask Brian, what's the answer to that puzzle? Because it doesn't feel like it's a histamine thing if you have to give someone epinephrine just to get them to the hospital. Something else.
Well, and T, if you think about it, I keep Benadryl in my purse. Isn't Benadryl an antihistamine?
It's an antihistamine. It's pulling you down.
Oh, because I'll pop a couple of those until I can get to more. And then when you get to the hospital, they pump you full of it.
Right. They give you a Benadryl drip and, you know, you're off in la la land for a few hours. But I'm just kind of curious because it's like, wait a second, you have this profound allergic reaction. So how does an antihistamine or epinephrine help that? But that's what you have to have in that moment in order to combat whatever the reaction is that's making everything else about your physical life collapse.
Right.
So I'm just kind of curious to know what the mechanism is there. Okay, so let's see if we can fit that in on Tuesday's call just to satisfy my little curiosity. Maybe I'll call them directly, but I love this idea about breathing your way through change. And so I'll put together a starting point for us on that.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
I will promote it accordingly. So, okay, so thanks everybody. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Bye for now.